Well, it's now official. A coroner has ruled the notorious Sydney conwoman Melissa Caddick is dead. Precisely how, where and when she died, though, remains a mystery. And what also remains is the misery of those who were duped out of millions of dollars of their savings by Caddick's simple scam. She claimed to be a financial whiz, promising huge returns to investors. Instead, she spent their money on herself. Tonight, in new vision we've obtained, you'll see Melissa Caddick enjoying the high life. But 2.5 years on from her con being exposed, there's now also a glimmer of hope for her many victims.
And action. Yeah, cool, sit on it. Yeah.
Welcome to Movie Night, or more specifically, the open-air cinema at the famed Bondi Beach.
I want you to lift them up and hand them over with a big laughing smile.
With the exception of the police raid on her house, we've never seen any video footage of Melissa Caddick before.
You did it, that's awesome.
But here she is, reveling in her apparent business success. It's 2016, and Melissa, along with her second husband Anthony Koletti and brother Adam Grimley, has scored VIP tickets for a fun night out, and the trio agreed to be filmed for a TV commercial.
Skipping! Or having fun anyway.
As far as everyone knows at this point, the business Melissa has been running for the last 3 years is a raging success, and doesn't she look damn happy with life? The designer handbag is only a hint of the millions of dollars she's swimming in at this point. Only problem is, it's all a Ponzi scheme, and she'd rorted dozens of victims, many of them her family and friends, out of close to $30 million.
We are asking the community to help bring Melissa home. That is all.
It wasn't until November 2020 that the world discovered what was really going on, when this initially sprung into the headlines as a missing persons case.
Ms. Caddick, are there any particularly high-value items here?
I'd say they're all high value.
But it quickly became apparent that there was much more to this than just a woman who disappeared on her morning walk. She'd actually fled after her $10 million mansion was raided by the federal police, accused of a major fraud.
Are there any items listed on there that are on the premises?
Yes.
Yes? What items are they?
Phones, jewellery, computers, storage devices, records.
Okay.
She had taken our money and she had never invested it anywhere. And she had been sending us completely forged documents from day dot.
Sarah Steele is one of the many investors cleaned out by Melissa Caddick, and tonight is speaking publicly for the very first time. So your investment, she blew the lot.
I mean, I assume so. I assume it went straight into, well, who knows? Who knows? Dresses and jewels and Aspen and I don't know.
When she talks about the dresses, jewels and Aspen, she's referring to the now infamous, obscene spending by the fraudster in the years before she was caught. Millions of dollars worth of custom-made jewellery, several high-powered sports cars, shopping binges on designer labels. She dropped nearly $250,000 at Christian Dior alone one year, and the jewel in the crown, her prized castle in Dover Heights overlooking Sydney Harbour. This apparent success was part of the reason Sarah believed that investing with Melissa Caddick would be a wise financial decision.
It was meeting someone who I would never have been in the orbit of someone like this in my regular life. I don't go to many mansions with harbour views, and I don't really have many friends in that kind of tier of wealth. So it was this interesting insight into how the other half lives sometimes, I suppose. Yeah, it'd be good for it to finally come to a close. I think this is.
Sarah came to know Melissa Caddick because her partner Joe was Melissa's cousin. They assumed she was someone they could trust and handed over Sarah's life savings as well as Joe's inheritance from his grandmother.
Realised what had happened and...
Naturally, when Melissa mysteriously disappeared, they were concerned for a loved one, not their nest egg.
After 7 days with no answers, Melissa Caddick's family is desperate.
A lot of what we learned, we ended up learning from the media when it was very apparent that other people knew many other things before we did, which was also really difficult to deal with, to be honest. And yeah, we got this news that she was missing, and it was just, it was so shocking. I was just so shocked and really worried, so worried about her. And so, Joe
and not worried about your investment at that point.
Of course not. She was missing. This was Joe's cousin. She was missing. It was just terrible news. And yeah, just incredibly worried about what had happened to her. And then over time, it was like, oh goodness, okay, she's done something. She's done something a bit shifty here, but she's not going to have messed around with her family's money. She's not going to have done that.
But she had. Nearly 60 other investors soon came to the realisation that their life savings were gone as well, left to rue the duplicity of this woman that they thought they knew and loved. For the last 2.5 years, they've been fighting to salvage whatever they can of the nearly $30 million Melissa Caddick plundered. But now, they've hit an unexpected roadblock: Melissa's own parents. There's a bitter dispute about the penthouse apartment that Melissa's mum and dad live in here at Edgecliff in Sydney's affluent eastern suburbs. The property was owned by Melissa, yet her parents, Ted and Barb Grimley, claim controversially that they're entitled to stay here for the rest of their lives. But other victims are adamant that, just like the rest of the fraudsters' assets, this should be sold off and the proceeds shared evenly amongst everyone that was ripped off.
I feel really terrible for what they've been through. I think it's awful. But it feels to me that they aren't feeling the same for the rest of us who are going through this same thing.
7 years ago, Ted and Barb Grimley gave Melissa $1 million for a share of the property. Little did they realise at the time that they too were about to become victims of their daughter's scam. She put the entire apartment in her own name, and instead of using their money to pay down the mortgage as agreed, the fraudster blew her parents' cash on jewellery.
None of the properties in their name, it's in Melissa Caddick's name.
Michael Chapman is the lawyer representing the vast majority of Melissa Caddick's victims. His clients say her parents are not entitled to what they're claiming.
They claim two things. Firstly, they say that they were given a life interest by Melissa. So there's certain emails that were sent by Melissa saying you can have a life interest in the property. And also they paid $1 million from the sale of their old house to pay down the mortgage on that property. So they say, well, we've contributed $1 million to the property.
After refusing to vacate the property, the Grimleys finally made an offer to the other victims at recent mediation. They would move out, but only if they were paid $950,000, effectively getting just about all their money returned.
They're getting 95% of their money back.
So if we take $950 off the sale amount for this Edgecliff apartment,
yes,
the rest of the proceeds then will be divided up between 56 investors?
Correct, that's right.
Any idea on what that would actually mean financially for them?
Yeah, once the receivers have finished the whole process, including the sale of the Edgecliff property, it looks like they're going to get back approximately 40 to 45% of what they lost.
Is that purely from the Edgecliff property, or are you talking about when we take the whole, include the Dover Heights property, everything like that?
But the 40 to 45% figure, that comes from the estimates that have been released by the receivers, and that's everything. So that includes the sale of the Edgecliff property as well.
Melissa's parents get 95% and then other investors get 45%.
That's correct.
Do they think that's fair?
It's not about what's fair, Tom. The investors primarily want this to be over. That's the strong feedback that we're getting. Litigation is hard, it's tiring, it's expensive. They just want to get out, and they want to see resolution to this.
Effectively, cut our losses, sign the deal, get it over with, get some money back, rather than just keep fighting this through the courts for months, years to come.
Swallow the bitter pill and get on with it.
We're facing a situation where other people are putting themselves forward as a priority to the other investors who were duped. And it's difficult for me to talk about this because I really feel for what they've been through. But watching the funds that are even available now to those who were ripped off by Melissa continue to dwindle because legal fights have to happen, and so the money goes to lawyers instead of back into people's pockets. That's very difficult.
You know, what jumps out at me is that so many people in this group of victims that you're part of are still family members of Melissa. Yet once again, Ted and Barb Grimley are saying, okay, yeah, you get looked after second, we get looked after first. Like this division within the family, it's awful.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's very difficult to get your head around. There's a definite fracture in our relationships. I haven't heard from them at all since this happened. We sent flowers when Melissa's remains were discovered, and I do really feel for what they've been through, but they have never returned the favour or been in touch with me about how I was impacted by the situation.
But there might be a breakthrough for the victims who are still so drastically out of pocket. One last legal roll of the dice that could save the day.
They could be in a position to get most of their money back.
On Thursday, 925 days after Melissa Caddick vanished from her Sydney mansion, her family arrived at the Coroner's Court of New South Wales, hoping for answers. Inside, there was one concrete finding, the court declaring the fraudster is definitely dead. But when it came to the cause of death, Deputy Coroner Elizabeth Ryan announced suspicions Melissa had taken her own life on the cliffs near her Dover Heights home were not able to be verified, and instead she could not rule out foul play being to blame for the 49-year-old's body ending up in the ocean.
The medical evidence can neither confirm nor exclude the possibility that Ms. Caddick's death was a result of another person harming her. I'm not able to make a positive finding that Ms. Caddick's starting point was the Dover Heights cliff line. It was equally plausible that her point of entry into the ocean was as far north as Brisbane and as far south as Hobart.
So she didn't say anything to you at all?
Not a thing.
Perhaps the strongest finding of all was that Melissa's husband, Anthony Koletti, had repeatedly lied to investigators in an attempt to cover up what happened when his wife first went missing 2.5 years ago.
I'm concerned where she is. I want to find where she is.
Good.
So I need you to
Thank
tell
you.
me everything, and I need you to tell me the truth.
It's everything.
I have concluded that during the period 11 to 13 November 2020, he had some awareness of Ms. Caddick's movements over the previous 2 days, but he chose not to disclose it. The inescapable conclusion I have reached is that throughout the investigation and the inquest, Mr. Koletti has chosen at times to make statements that are simply untrue. This invites the question why Mr. Koletti has been unwilling to provide a frank account of what took place.
Outside the court, Anthony Koletti was stony-faced after his dressing down.
Anthony, the coroner was absolutely damning of you. What are you hiding, Anthony?
After pushing his way through the waiting media scrum, he jumped in a getaway vehicle being driven by Melissa's brother, Adam Grimley, who, just to add to the bizarreness of the courtroom drama, held down the horn of his car before racing away. But the Melissa Caddick case might be heading back to court again soon for a very different reason. Lawyers for the majority of the victims are now considering suing the auditors that Melissa hired during her high-flying business days. They had been tasked with casting a critical eye over all of the fraudsters' finances and never once raised a red flag.
It's one of the longest-running frauds in Australian history. Over that whole period of time, not one auditor of the accounts, and they're required to be audited annually, ever picked up a problem.
Michael Chapman is the lawyer who'll be leading the case. He is completely dumbfounded how the auditors couldn't have noticed that something was up here.
Melissa prepares the documents that relate to how the funds are being invested, what the returns are, etc. And an auditor is required to look at those documents annually and determine that everything's shipshape.
And so an auditor did look at those documents?
An auditor certainly charged the clients for looking at those documents.
But never picked up anything?
Never picked up a problem, never picked up any issues.
And so this is someone whose job is purely to make sure that these investments are legit. Clearly, we now know they were totally bogus. You feel like they've dropped the ball?
We feel like they've dropped the ball. We feel as though there is a good claim that could be brought against the auditors.
Lawyers will be seeking $15 million from the auditors in any potential court case. And if they have success, it'll mean victims finally go close to getting back all of the money they thought they'd never see again.
This, combined with the money they've already received back, or they will receive back from the good work the receivers have done to date, means they could be in a position to get most of their money back.
Pretty extraordinary when you think of the heartbreak that was there in those first few months for people when they realised what they'd lost.
It is extraordinary, and I don't discount the pain and the suffering that these people have been through to this point.
But for them, this would be a silver lining for the cloud.
It would be a silver lining.
Before we get into this episode, a content warning.
Melissa Caddick victim Sarah Steele has written a book and hosts a podcast about the mind games used by people who run cults.
She started asking herself some bigger questions about control.
But even she couldn't have foreseen the dark manipulation her relative would use on loved ones for her own financial gain.
Everyone likes to think that it wouldn't happen to them because it's a self-protection mechanism to think I would never end up in that situation. But it's actually unfathomable what she was capable of doing, because she was doing it, she was even doing it to her parents. Like, she was taking money from people who she had known since she was born. So I think our brains don't really work in a way, if we're not that type of person, to even be able to imagine that that is possible. And that's why it took such a long time to realise what had happened as well, because it's like outside of the realms of your possibilities.
With court findings and financial settlements being made, after 2.5 years, perhaps the curtains are finally closing on the Melissa Caddick melodrama. And that's very welcome news for the unwitting players in this horror story.
Like, there are so many elements to it. You're figuring out if you're mourning someone, and then you're actually mourning the fact that you never really knew that person. And I still believe that most people in the world are good. I was just really unlucky to have come across the path of someone who, I guess, she wasn't good.
Hello, I'm Tom Steinfort. Thank you for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes, which are on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.